The slap echoed through the living room like a gunshot, and for a moment, the entire world stopped. My 8-month-old daughter Rowan's cry pierced through the festive Christmas music, and I watched in horror as my sister Marlene pulled her hand back, her face twisted in rage, while 500,000 people watched it all unfold on her Instagram livestream. The sound of my baby's scream mixed with the collective gasp of strangers watching through their phones, and I knew in that instant that everything was about to change. My sister had just slapped my infant daughter on camera, and there would be no coming back from this. If you're here listening to this story, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shake you to your core. Drop a comment below if you've ever dealt with toxic family members who thought they could get away with anything. Now let me take you back to the beginning to show you how we got to that horrific Christmas night. My name is Joy, and I used to be the kind of person who believed that family was everything. I was raised with the value that you protect your family, you forgive your family, and you never ever air your dirty laundry in public. My parents, Evelyn and Harold, drilled that into me from childhood. My sister Marlene was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the reliable one, the steady one, the one who kept my head down and worked hard without needing praise or attention. Marlene was 3 years older than me, and somewhere along the line she discovered that her face and her carefully curated life could make her money. She built an empire as a mum influencer, posting perfect pictures of her perfect children in their perfect outfits, sharing parenting tips and product recommendations to her hundreds of thousands of followers. Everything about her online presence was manufactured, from the way she arranged her kitchen counter for morning smoothie tutorials to the candid laughs she practiced in the mirror before filming. But my parents ate it up. They bragged about her to everyone, showed off her Instagram posts like they were medical degrees, and constantly reminded me that I should be more like my successful sister. I married Marcus 3 years ago, and he was everything Marlene's polished world was not. He was real, solid, genuine. Marcus was a former Marine turned corporate attorney, the kind of man who didn't waste words, but when he spoke, people listened. He saw through Marlene's facade from day one, and he never pretended otherwise. My parents didn't love that about him. They thought he was too serious, too protective of me, too unwilling to play along with the family dynamics that had existed long before he came into the picture. When I got pregnant with Rowan, Marlene suddenly became very interested in my life. She wanted to feature me in her content to show her followers the journey of becoming an aunt, to use my pregnancy as part of her brand narrative. I was hesitant, but my parents pushed me. They said it would be good for family bonding, that I should be supportive of my sister's career, that it was just a few photos and videos. Marcus told me to trust my gut, but I ignored him. I wanted my parents' approval. I wanted to believe that maybe Marlene and I could finally have the sisterly relationship I'd always craved. The pregnancy content brought Marlene thousands of new followers. She posted belly photos without asking shared details about my birth plan that I told her in confidence, and even showed up at the hospital with a ring light when I was in labour. Marcus physically blocked her from the delivery room, and she cried to our parents that he was keeping her from supporting me. They believed her, of course, they always did. After Rowan was born, things got worse. Marlene would show up unannounced to take photos with the baby, positioning Rowan as a prop in her content while barely acknowledging me. She'd post captions about being the favourite aunt, about how she was teaching me how to be a mum, even though she conveniently left out the fact that I'd been helping raise her kids for years while she built her brand. My parents encouraged it all. They'd call me selfish when I tried to set boundaries, reminding me that family helps family, and that Marlene's success reflected well on all of us. I worked as a data analyst for a tech company, a job that required precision logic and calm decision-making. At work, I was respected for my analytical mind and my ability to see patterns others missed. But at home with my family, I became someone else. I became small, accommodating, desperate for crumbs of approval that never came. Marcus would watch me shrink around my family, and his jaw would tighten. but he respected my choice to handle it my own way. Until that Christmas. My parents insisted on hosting a big Christmas Eve celebration at their house. Marlene had been promoting it on her social media for weeks, teasing a special live stream where she'd be opening designer gifts and showing off the perfect family Christmas. She'd bought a custom dress for the occasion, some designer piece that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The whole thing made me uncomfortable, but I convinced myself it would be fine. It was just one night. I could manage one night. We arrived at my parents' house around 6 in the evening. The place was decorated like a department store display window, every surface covered in expensive ornaments and twinkling lights. There were cameras set up everywhere, ring lights positioned in corners, and Marlene had even hired a professional photographer to capture content. My mother rushed over when we arrived, but she barely glanced at Rowan in my arms. Instead, she immediately started fussing over whether our outfits would photograph well and reminding me not to get in the way of any of Marlene's shots. The evening started off tense but manageable. Marlene was in full performance mode, her voice an octave higher than normal, her laugh practiced and bright for the cameras. She largely ignored me except when she needed me to hold something or move out of frame. My father spent the whole time operating as her assistant, adjusting lighting and checking camera angles. Marcus stood close to me, one hand always on my back or shoulder, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone, even if I felt invisible to my own parents. Around 8 o'clock, Marlene announced it was time for the live stream. She positioned herself on the pristine white sofa in the living room, surrounded by elaborately wrapped presents. Her phone was mounted on a tripod, the angle perfect to capture both her and the Christmas tree behind her. She went live, and I watched the viewer count climb rapidly. 1,000, 5,000, 20,000. People flooded in to watch Marlene's perfect Christmas, leaving heart emojis and comments about how blessed and beautiful she was. Then she gestured to me. "Come here," she mouthed, waving me over with that influencer smile plastered on her face. I hesitated, but my mother was already pushing me forward, whispering urgently that I shouldn't ruin this for Marlene. Marcus's hand slipped from my back as I walked toward the sofa, Rowan drowsy in my arms. My baby had been fussy all day fighting sleep, and I knew she was exhausted and overstimulated. Marlene didn't ask if she could hold Rowan. She just reached over and plucked my daughter from my arms, positioning her on her lap, facing the camera. "Look at my gorgeous niece, everyone," Marlene cooed into the camera, her voice sugary sweet. "Isn't she just precious? Say hi to Auntie's friends, baby girl." Rowan immediately started to whimper, her little face scrunching up in that way I knew meant she was about to cry. I reached forward to take her back, but Marlene waved me off without even looking at me. "She's fine," she said, still smiling at the camera. "We're just getting some adorable auntie-niece content." But Rowan wasn't fine. She started crying harder, her body stiffening in Marlene's arms. My sister's smile became strained, and I could see the panic in her eyes as she tried to bounce Rowan on her knee, trying to soothe her, while maintaining the perfect image for her followers. The comments started changing. "Is the baby okay? She looks uncomfortable. Maybe give her back to Mum." Marlene's jaw clenched, her grip on Rowan tightening as she tried to turn the baby away from the camera. That's when it happened. Rowan, overwhelmed and exhausted, spit up. It wasn't much, just a small amount of baby reflux, but it landed directly on the front of Marlene's designer dress, a white stain spreading across the expensive fabric. The colour drained from Marlene's face, and for a second, her mask slipped completely. I saw pure rage flash across her features, rage that had nothing to do with a ruined dress, and everything to do with her perfect image being shattered in front of 500,000 people. "You little brat," Marlene hissed. And before I could even process what was happening, her hand came up and cracked across Rowan's face. The slap wasn't soft or accidental. It was hard, deliberate, the sound of it echoing through the room like a thunderclap. Rowan's cry turned into a scream of pain and terror, and the comments on the live stream exploded. "Did she just hit that baby? Someone call the police. This is abuse." I moved without thinking. Some primal part of me took over. and I lunged forward, ripping Rowan from Marlene's arms and clutching my screaming baby to my chest. My hands were shaking as I checked Rowan's face, seeing the red mark already forming on her tiny cheek, and something inside me broke and reformed in the same instant. I looked up at Marlene, who was frantically trying to angle her phone away, trying to turn off the live stream. And I saw her not as my sister, but as someone who had just assaulted my child. "You hit her," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but filled with so much fury that Marlene actually flinched. "You hit my baby." Marlene's face twisted. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't sorry. Instead, she shoved me her hands, hitting my shoulders hard enough that I stumbled backward. "Your kid just ruined my dress and destroyed my live stream," she shrieked, her influencer voice completely gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "Do you know how much this dress cost? Do you know how many people were watching? You can't even control your own child joy. This is your fault." My mother rushed over, but not to check on Rowan. She rushed to Marlene to inspect the stain on her dress, to pick up the phone that had clattered to the floor when Marlene shoved me. My father stood frozen, looking between his daughters with an expression of calculation that made my stomach turn. He wasn't trying to figure out how to help his granddaughter. He was trying to figure out how to manage this situation. That's when Marcus moved. I'd never seen him move that fast before. 1 second he was across the room, the next he was between Marlene and me, his body a wall of protection. His hand shot out, not touching Marlene, but pointing directly at her face, and when he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "You touch my wife again, you touch my daughter again, and I will make sure you never see the outside of a jail cell. Do you understand me?" Marlene actually stepped back, her eyes wide. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't backing down from her, wasn't letting her manipulate or charm or play victim. Marcus turned to my parents, and his expression was carved from stone. "You two saw what just happened. Your daughter assaulted an 8-month-old infant, on camera, in front of 500,000 witnesses." My mother's face crumpled. "Joy," she said, turning to me with desperation in her eyes. "Don't make a big deal out of this. It was an accident. Marlene didn't mean it. You know how stressed she gets during her live streams. Just apologise to your sister for the dress, and we can all move past this." I stared at my mother, at this woman who had given birth to me, raised me, and was now asking me to apologise to the person who had just struck my baby. I looked down at Rowan in my arms, at the red mark on her face, at her tear-streaked cheeks, and something crystallised inside me with perfect clarity. My mother was choosing Marlene's reputation over Rowan's safety. My father was worried about image management instead of his granddaughter's well-being, and I was done. Marcus already had his phone out. "I'm calling 911, he said calmly, and my mother gasped like he'd suggested something obscene. "We're reporting a case of child abuse. The evidence is on video, witnessed by thousands of people, and I want it documented officially." "You can't do that," my father said, his voice sharp. "Think about what this will do to the family. Think about Marlene's career. Think about how this will look." Marcus looked at him with something close to pity. "I'm thinking about my family," he said. "My family is my wife and my daughter, and I'm protecting them. What you're trying to protect is your image, and I don't give a damn about that." He made the call. My mother started crying, begging me to stop this, to think about my sister's future. Marlene stood there in her stained designer dress, her face pale, watching her perfect Christmas Eve dissolve into chaos. Within 20 minutes, 2 police officers arrived at the door. The party was over. The next few hours were a blur. The officers took statements. They documented the mark on Rowan's face with photographs. They collected Marlene's phone as evidence, since the live stream was still technically recoverable, even though she'd ended it. One of the viewers had already screen-recorded the entire thing and posted it on Twitter, where it was spreading like wildfire. Marlene was arrested and taken to the station. My mother sobbed. My father made frantic phone calls to their lawyer. And I sat in the back of Marcus's car with Rowan, feeling simultaneously numb and more awake than I'd ever been in my life. We drove home in silence. Marcus carried Rowan inside, while I just stood in our driveway staring at our house with its modest Christmas decorations, so different from my parents' elaborate display. When I finally went inside, Marcus had already put Rowan down in her crib. She'd cried herself to sleep, exhausted from the trauma. I stood over her crib, watching her breathe, seeing that red mark still visible on her cheek, and I made myself a promise. Never again would I sacrifice my child for my family's approval. Never again would I make myself small to make them comfortable. The next morning, my phone was flooded with notifications. The video had gone viral. Marlene's username was trending on Twitter. Parenting forums were dissecting what had happened. Some of Marlene's followers were defending her, claiming the slap was edited or exaggerated, but the majority were horrified. Several sponsors had already posted statements about reviewing their partnerships with her. The perfect image she'd spent years building was crumbling in real time. My parents called 17 times before I finally answered. When I did, it wasn't my mother's voice I heard first, it was my father, and he was furious. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he said, not even bothering with hello. "Your sister is being crucified online. She's lost 3 major sponsorships already. The police are pressing charges. You need to drop this right now, Joy. You need to go down to the station and tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "No," I said simply. There was a long pause. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice stronger. "Marlene assaulted my daughter. That's not a misunderstanding, that's a crime. And I'm not protecting her from the consequences of her actions anymore." "You're being selfish," my father spat. "You're destroying your sister's life over one little mistake." "She barely touched Rowan. You're blowing this completely out of proportion." "She slapped an infant dad," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes, but keeping my voice steady. "She slapped my 8-month-old baby, hard enough to leave a mark because Rowan spit up on her dress. And instead of being horrified by that, instead of immediately checking on your granddaughter, you and Mum worried about Marlene's dress and her phone. Do you understand how messed up that is?" My mother took the phone. "Honey, please," she said, her voice pleading. "Can't we just handle this as a family? Why do the police need to be involved? Why can't we work this out privately? Think about what this is doing to all of us. Think about the shame, the embarrassment. Everyone we know is calling us, asking questions. This is tearing the family apart." "I'm not the one tearing this family apart, Mum," I said quietly. "You tore it apart a long time ago when you decided that Marlene's success mattered more than anything else. When you decided that keeping up appearances was more important than treating your daughters equally. When you taught me that my feelings, my needs, my child's safety, all of that was less important than protecting Marlene's image. I'm just finally seeing it clearly." My mother's voice turned cold. "If you go through with this, if you don't drop these charges, then you're choosing to cut yourself off from this family. Is that really what you want? To be alone?" "I'm not alone," I told her. "I have Marcus, I have Rowan, I have real friends who actually care about me, not just what I can do for them. And if choosing to protect my daughter means losing you and Dad, then that's a choice I can live with." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I also felt lighter than I had in years. The legal process moved forward. Marlene was charged with child abuse, a misdemeanor that carried potential jail time, mandatory parenting classes, and a permanent record. Her lawyer tried to get the charges reduced, arguing that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, that Marlene was under stress, that the incident was being blown out of proportion by social media. But the video didn't lie. Thousands of people had watched Marlene slap my baby, had heard her scream at me, had seen her show zero remorse in the immediate aftermath. Then things got worse. 2 weeks after the Christmas incident, there was a knock on our door. I opened it to find a woman with a badge and a clipboard. She introduced herself as a social worker with Child Protective Services. Someone had filed a report claiming that Rowan was being neglected and possibly abused in our home, and they were required to investigate. I felt the blood drain from my face. Marcus appeared behind me, his hand on my shoulder, and I could feel the tension in his body. The social worker was professional but thorough. She inspected our home, checking for safety hazards, looking at Rowan's sleeping area, examining our food supply. She interviewed me and Marcus separately, asking detailed questions about our parenting, our relationship, our daily routines. She examined Rowan, checking for any signs of injury or distress beyond the fading mark from Marlene's slap. The visit lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the social worker sat us down at our kitchen table. "I want you to know that I see cases of actual neglect and abuse every day," she said gently. "This is not one of them. Your daughter is healthy, happy, well cared for, and clearly loved. Your home is safe and clean. Your attentive parents. I'm going to close this case as unfounded, but I want to warn you that whoever filed this report filed it maliciously. They made very specific allegations that are clearly false. If you have any idea who might have done this, you should know that filing a false CPS report is a crime. I knew exactly who had done it. Marlene. This was her revenge, her way of trying to make me feel what she was feeling to threaten what I loved most. She wanted to scare me into dropping the charges to make me understand that she could hurt me just as badly as I was hurting her. The realization made me physically sick. Marcus was less measured in his response. "We're adding false reporting to the lawsuit," he said flatly. He'd already contacted a lawyer, a colleague from his firm who specialised in family law. We weren't just pursuing criminal charges anymore. We were filing a civil suit against Marlene for assault defamation, and now for filing a false CPS report. Marcus's lawyer had also found the original livestream screen recorded and backed up by multiple sources. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came Marlene's public response. Instead of laying low, instead of showing any remorse, she doubled down. She posted a tearful video on Instagram, her eyes red and puffy, her voice breaking as she told her version of events. She claimed that Rowan had scratched her, that the slap was a reflexive, defensive gesture, that she'd been attacked by her own family for one tiny mistake. She painted me as jealous of her success, vindictive, using the legal system to destroy her out of spite. She even suggested that I was an unfit mother who couldn't control my child, which was why CPS had gotten involved. The comments were split. Some of her loyal followers believed her attacking me online, sending messages calling me horrible names, even trying to get me fired from my job by contacting my employer with false complaints. But a significant portion of the internet saw through her lies. The video didn't match her narrative. You could hear her call Rowan a brat. You could see the deliberate wind-up of the slap. You could hear me, not her, trying to calm the baby. Parenting experts weighed in. Doctors explained that an 8-month-old baby couldn't possibly pose a threat that would require a defensive strike. Marlene's credibility was crumbling, but she kept digging, kept lying, kept trying to salvage her image. My parents tried one more time to intervene. They called and asked me to come to dinner, just the family, to try to work things out. Marcus advised against it, but some part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally choose right over easy. I agreed to meet them at a restaurant neutral ground. I should have known better. When I walked in, Marlene was already there, sitting between our parents. She'd set me up. My first instinct was to turn around and leave, but my father stood up and gestured to the empty chair across from them. "Sit down, Joy," he said. "We're going to resolve this like adults." I sat, but I kept my phone in my hand, my finger hovering over Marcus's number on speed dial. My mother started talking immediately, her words tumbling over each other. She spoke about family loyalty, about forgiveness, about how sisters fight, but they don't destroy each other. She said that Marlene had apologised, that she felt terrible about everything, that she was willing to pay for any therapy Rowan might need. She said that if I would just drop the charges and the lawsuit, they could pay for Rowan's college fund, help with our mortgage, whatever we needed. I looked at Marlene. She wasn't crying, she wasn't apologetic. She was watching me with calculating eyes, waiting to see if their bribe would work. "Say something," I told her. "If you're so sorry, say it to me. Tell me you're sorry for hitting my baby." Marlene's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Look, Joy," she said, her voice taking on that patronising tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable. "I already said I'm sorry for how things escalated, but you have to understand that you're overreacting. Kids get fussy. Things happen. This whole legal circus you're putting on is just embarrassing for everyone. I made one mistake, one little reflexive movement, and you're trying to destroy my entire career over it. That's not fair." "One little reflexive movement," I repeated slowly. "You slapped my 8-month-old daughter in the face hard enough to leave a bruise, and you're calling it reflexive." She spit up on a $5,000 dress. Marlene snapped her mask, slipping again. Do you know how hard I've worked for what I have? Do you know how much pressure I'm under? And your kid ruined everything in one moment. Yes, I reacted. Yes, it wasn't ideal. But the way you've weaponized this, going to the police, getting lawyers involved, letting it become this media circus that's on you. So you're saying it's my fault you hit her, I said. I'm saying you could have handled this privately, Marlene said. We're family. You could have talked to me, let me apologize properly and moved on. Instead, you called the cops like I'm some kind of criminal. And now you're suing me. Do you know what that's doing to my life? I've lost sponsors. Brands won't work with me. My reputation is destroyed. And for what? Because I tapped your kid once. Tapped, I said, feeling anger surge through me like electricity. You didn't tap her. You hit her, and you're not sorry. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry it was on camera. You're sorry your precious image is ruined. But you're not actually sorry for hurting my daughter. That's not true, my mother interjected. Marlene has been devastated by this whole situation. She cries every day. Then why hasn't she contacted me once to apologise, I said, looking at my mother. Why hasn't she asked about Rowan, about how she's doing, whether she's scared or hurt? Why is every single word out of her mouth about her dress, her career, her reputation? Why is everything always about Marlene? Because Marlene is the one whose life is being destroyed, my father said, his voice hard. You're fine, Joy. Rowan is fine. She won't even remember this. But Marlene's career might never recover. Years of work gone. And you could fix this right now by just being the bigger person and letting it go. Something about that phrase, being the bigger person, broke something inside me. I'd been the bigger person my entire life. I'd been understanding when Marlene took credit for my ideas. I'd been forgiving when she excluded me from family events because I didn't photograph well. I'd been accommodating when she used my pregnancy for content without asking. I'd been patient when she treated my daughter like a prop. And my reward for being the bigger person was being told to accept that my child had been assaulted and move on. No, I said quietly. No, my father repeated, his eyebrows rising. No, I said again louder, I'm not dropping the charges, I'm not dropping the lawsuit, and I'm not being the bigger person anymore because being the bigger person has meant making myself smaller for my entire life. It's meant accepting that Marlene's feelings matter more than mine, that her success matters more than my dignity, that her image matters more than my child's safety. I'm done with that. I'm done. Marlene leaned forward and I saw real anger in her face now. You're making a huge mistake, she said, her voice low. You think you're so righteous, but you're just bitter and jealous. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're using this situation to try to tear me down. But it's not going to work. I have resources, I have lawyers, I have a platform. I can make your life hell joy. You already tried that, I said calmly. You filed a false CPS report, didn't you? You tried to get my daughter taken away from me to scare me into backing down. My parents' faces went pale. Marlene's expression flickered for just a second, surprise and guilt flashing across her features before she schooled them back into innocence. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. I think you do, I replied, and I think my lawyer is going to prove it. Because whoever filed that report knew specific details about our home details they could only know if they'd been inside recently or if someone who'd been inside told them. And the only person who's been in our home in the last 6 months who would have any motivation to hurt us is you. This is ridiculous, Marlene said, but her voice was shaky now. You're paranoid. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to continue with both the criminal case and the civil lawsuit. I'm going to let the evidence speak for itself, the video of you hitting my daughter, the video of you verbally abusing me, the records of the false CPS report. And I'm never going to speak to any of you again unless it's through lawyers. Joy, wait, my mother said, reaching for me, but I stepped back. You made your choice, I told her, looking at both my parents. When you saw your daughter hit your granddaughter, you chose to protect the hitter instead of the victim. When you had the chance to do the right thing, you chose image over integrity. You chose the child who makes you look good over the child who actually loves you, and I hope it was worth it. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high and my phone already dialing Marcus. When he answered, I said 3 words, "It's over," and he knew exactly what I meant. I was done trying to fix my family. I was done hoping they'd change. I was done sacrificing myself and my daughter on the altar of family loyalty. The legal process took months. Marlene's lawyer tried everything, motion after motion, to get the case dismissed, to suppress the video evidence, to discredit me as a witness. But the evidence was too strong. The video showed everything. Multiple viewers had come forward to provide testimony about what they'd witnessed. The screen recordings showed not only the slap, but Marlene's response afterward, her lack of concern for Rowan, her anger at me for taking my baby back. The criminal case went to trial. I had to sit in a courtroom and watch that video played over and over, had to hear my daughter's cry echoing through the speakers, had to see that moment of impact frozen and analysed frame by frame. Marcus sat beside me the entire time, his hand in mine, keeping me grounded. Marlene sat at the defence table in demure clothing so different from her usual influencer style, playing the role of repentant defendant. But when she took the stand, the mask slipped. Under cross-examination, she couldn't maintain the facade of remorse. She blamed stress, blamed me for bringing an irritable baby to a professional event, blamed social media for blowing things out of proportion. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Child abuse. Filing a false police report. Marlene's face crumbled, real tears finally appearing, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. The judge sentenced her to 1 year in jail, suspended to 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, mandatory anger management and parenting classes, and a permanent restraining order preventing her from contacting me, Marcus or Rowan. Additionally, she was ordered to pay restitution for the emotional distress and our legal fees. The civil suit was even more satisfying. With the criminal conviction as precedent, Marlene's lawyer advised her to settle. She agreed to pay a substantial sum, $250,000, to be placed in a trust fund for Rowan's future. She also had to issue a public apology, a real one, not the manipulative word, salad, she'd posted on Instagram. In the statement drafted and approved by our lawyer, she admitted to striking. Rowan admitted to lying about the circumstances, admitted to filing the false CPS report, and acknowledged that her actions were indefensible. The statement went viral, but not in the way Marlene had hoped. Her remaining followers abandoned her. Her verified checkmark was removed. Her accounts were flooded with criticism, and eventually she deleted them all. The influencer career she'd built over a decade was gone, destroyed in the same public forum where she'd built it. My parents never apologised. They sent a few text messages in the beginning, half-hearted attempts to maintain some connection, but I never responded. Eventually, they stopped trying. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd become pariahs in their social circle, that people who'd once envied them for having a famous daughter now whispered about them as the grandparents who'd enabled child abuse. They'd chosen sides and they'd chosen wrong, and the consequences were theirs to bear. The weeks after the trial were strange. I felt lighter but also unmoored, like I'd been carrying a weight for so long that without it I wasn't sure how to balance. I started therapy, real therapy, with a psychologist who specialised in family trauma and toxic relationships. She helped me understand that I'd been groomed from childhood to accept the family dynamic, that the patterns of favoritism and scapegoating had shaped my entire identity. She helped me work through the guilt I felt for cutting off my parents, helped me understand that protecting my child wasn't cruel, it was necessary. Marcus was my rock through all of it. There were nights I woke up panicking, wondering if I'd done the right thing, if I'd destroyed my family over something that could have been forgiven. And every time he'd hold me and remind me that my family had destroyed itself long before that Christmas night. He reminded me that real love doesn't require you to sacrifice your child's safety for someone else's comfort. He reminded me that I'd given them every chance to choose differently, and they'd chosen wrong every single time. Rowan turned 1 year old 6 months after the trial ended. We had a small party in our backyard, just close friends and Marcus's family people who genuinely cared about us. There were no cameras, no performances, no one trying to use my daughter for content or clout. It was simple and real and filled with love. As I watched Rowan smash her first birthday cake, her face covered in frosting, her laugh echoing through the yard, I felt something I hadn't felt in years around family gatherings. I felt peace. A few weeks after Rowan's birthday, I got a notification from my bank. A large deposit had been made, the settlement money from Marlene's payment. $250,000 secured in a trust for Rowan's future. Money that came from the destruction of Marlene's career, from the consequences of her own actions. Money that would one day help my daughter build whatever life she wanted. There was justice in that symmetry that felt almost poetic. I sat at my desk that evening, Rowan asleep in her crib, Marcus reading in the living room, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the person I used to be, the one who shrunk herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her, who believed that love meant endless sacrifice without reciprocation. I thought about that Christmas night, about the sound of that slap, about the moment everything changed. I'd been so afraid of losing my family. But in the end, I hadn't lost anything real. I'd shed dead weight, cut away, rot removed toxicity that had been poisoning me for years. The family I'd mourned wasn't a family worth keeping. They'd proven that by choosing image over love, comfort over justice, the easy lie over the hard truth. Now I had a real family, small but genuine, Marcus, Rowan friends who showed up when it mattered, and a life that was finally mine. Not a performance, not a supporting role in someone else's narrative, but authentically mine. People ask if I regret it, if I miss my parents or sister. I miss the family I wish I'd had, the one that never actually existed. But I don't miss making myself small. I don't miss the anxiety, the ache of loving people who saw me as either a tool or an obstacle. Here's what I learnt. Breaking free from toxic family isn't one moment of courage. It's 1,000 small choices to pick yourself when everyone says that's selfish. It's knowing that loyalty isn't love, that obligation isn't devotion. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even if they share your blood. Real family isn't about genetics. It's about respect, genuine care, and showing up when it matters. Marcus showed me real partnership. My friends showed me chosen family. And Rowan showed me what unconditional love truly means, not the twisted version where it meant accepting abuse, but the real version where love means protection and value. I still have moments of doubt, flashes of grief for what could have been, but then I come home to my small real family and I remember what I have is worth infinitely more than what I lost. If you're in a toxic family situation, if you're the scapegoat, always expected to be the bigger person, hear this. You deserve better. You deserve love without conditions, respect without earning it. And if your family can't give you that, you have every right to build a new one with people who can. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. Walking away isn't failure. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, your peace, your safety. And if that means losing people who were supposed to love you, they never really loved you. They loved the version of you that made their lives easier. And that version doesn't deserve to exist. I chose my daughter over my family of origin, and I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. Because she's my real family now, along with Marcus and the people who've proven they deserve a place in our lives. We're building something beautiful, something healthy, something real. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? Have you been the scapegoat, always expected to sacrifice, while others get away with terrible behaviour? Drop your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story. Let's build a community that understands choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Let's remind each other we deserve love that doesn't hurt family, that doesn't wound, and peace that doesn't cost our souls. Thank you for listening. You're not alone.